Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us again for the third week of Food for Thought. And we're going to look at food systems. You'll be led by Arran Towers, based in West Cork. Remember that weeks 1 and 2 are still available online if you've missed a session or if you'd like to look back at any stage. And keeping in mind that we have a live Q&A coming up, I'd encourage you to make note of any questions that come up for you. Next week, you'll be able to pose your questions to Self-Help Africa's Director of Programs, Orla Kilcullen. Your questions can relate to any of the content that we've covered so far or topics that we have coming up later in the course. So the live session will take place next Thursday, the 11th of November at 1 p.m. Irish time over Zoom. You can refer to your email for details of how to register and how to submit questions. We'll provide a recording afterwards for anyone who can't make it to this session. And now to today. Last week we met Hugh Bergen, who told us about the UN's Sustainable Development Goals. Following on from this, our next speaker, Arran Towers, will now tell you about food systems, sharing examples of how current food production is unsustainable, the importance of soil conservation and our relationship with the land, as well as a fresh, regenerative look at the global goals. So enjoy the session, and as usual, you'll find further resources on the webpage for any additional reading.
Hi there, my name's Arran Towers, and I work for Self-Help Africa in their education team. And I'm here to introduce for this course the subject of food systems and the challenges we all face for moving towards more sustainable and just food production. I thought to start outside and with apples, as I'm lucky enough to live near to an organic farm here in West Cork, and it has a small orchard. Just further over into the hedge there, the blackberries have largely passed now, and it's been a very poor year for sloes in this area. So we're in a season of plenty, apples falling off the trees, a good season for harvest right now here in Ireland. Perhaps this is something we importantly need to revisit, the idea of seasonality. If we are really going to enjoy and promote and champion local produce, we may need to reconsider this notion of the global summertime, and that we can enjoy all fruits, all products, all of the time. When we are considering such complex concepts as global systems, trade agreements and sustainable development, we must always pull back and try and keep it simple and focus on the core values, our true priorities. What are our apple core values? So when considering food and the global interdependent system we are all part of, what is it we want our food system to do for us? And just importantly, a question, what do we want it not to do? So a question to put to us all is, how is it? How is it right that our food system right now means that in a season where apples are now plentiful in Ireland, that it's still easier and often cheaper to buy apples that have travelled thousands and thousands of kilometres? This apple could be hit from here, from Ireland. It could be a UK apple, it could be from France, or equally it could have grown and been transported from Chile or Brazil. And at certain times in the year, it could just as easily have come all the way from New Zealand. Is this sustainable? Or is it low impact? Is it healthy? Is it environmentally friendly? Clearly not. Also, is it economically supporting Irish producers, this system? Also, clearly not. Apparently it was the Romans that brought the apple across Europe from Turkey or thereabouts. And the Romans liked apples for many reasons, but it was successful because it travelled so well. It was so easy to transport, even by foot and cart. And now the apple is found around the world. A leading product in the global summer we now consider normal. So the simple apple is not simply an apple. As conscious consumers, ethical consumers, we must always read the label. Where was it grown? Perhaps it's organic, perhaps not. What environmental and worker standards were adhered to? Perhaps I could invite you to pause the video here and jot down for yourself what you think should be the core values, the apple core values for food production, and what practices should it not engage with. Are we looking for health and nutrition, sustainable standards, just workers' rights and human rights adhered to, environmental standards, health and safety, prevention of pollution, sustainable uses of water, all these elements? Note down for yourself your values and priorities for food. Okay, so I've come into the kitchen for this next section. My work for Self-Help Africa is as a development education and global citizenship education officer. So my daily work is devising resources and content and then running workshops to explore with participants ways of critically viewing the way things are, the status quo, and actively getting involved in reimagining different ways and relationships we have with the world and the processes that we rely on, and looking at actively changing and being active citizens, taking action. But the first step along the way is being able to realize or visualize the challenges and to see the way things are. And in a complicated world, this can be very difficultly done, especially when just listening to someone. So it's better to have some visual representations of what we're talking about. So here's a visual way that you might want to share after this that looks at how vitally important it is to consider soil and the management of it, the sustainable and even restorative management of soil. So if we imagine our planet as an apple, as you may know, the French pomme de terre, earth apple, earth fruit, how much of the surface of our earth, our globe, is available to us as a species to farm? How much of the soil do we rely on for all our food? That's the question. So we're going to cut this up to find out. So if I cut our apple, our earth, into quarters, like that, 4 quarters, we can get or take away 3/4 of the Earth's surface, because 3/4 of the Earth is under the ocean, under the seas and ocean. So we don't really live on a green planet, we live on a blue one. So the land is only 1/4 of the world's surface. So we cut this remaining quarter in half. So we now have 2/8. 1/8 of the available land of the earth is not suitable for farming, for producing food. It's the frozen poles, the high mountains, the wetlands, and the deserts. All aren't farmed. So we put that away and we have 1/8 of the world's surface. Now carefully, I have to cut that 1/8 into 4 slithers, which isn't easy to do. Make sure you've got a good knife. So now we have what is equivalent to 32th of the Earth. So 4 32nd sections of the Earth. So this is 1/32th of the land of the whole of the Earth. And that is all the land coverage of all the world's farms. Because the others are not desert, but are too hot and dry. One is too wet. It's not wetland, but it's swamp and it floods every year and it's not productive. Not economically anyway. And one is too rocky and steep, again, not productive or economic. So the world's farms are contained on this slither of the globe. Sorry. This is the soil that we have to rely on. So remember, we're not even thinking of all this because we're just thinking, and we take everything else away. Apart from the peel, because we're only concerned with the uppermost layer, the first, not even meter really, of soil at the very top is the fertile growing zone for all our crops and animal feed. That's all we have to rely on and manage, conserve, and hopefully restore and improve is the challenge. I thought I'd show off my chickens as we consider further our core values and priorities. These lucky ladies are ex-battery hens. And we're very sorry looking hens when we got them just a few short months ago, but now are healthy and fine looking and very productive, happy egg laying hens. In the industrialized system of egg production, hens like these rarely see their first birthday, as they're replaced after their first molt, as apparently their productivity dips. Yeah, a very short and sad existence. And is it really necessary for affordable and accessible food to do it this way? Let's talk about the tricky issue of being sustainable by considering chickens. As I think we're beyond arguing that change is required in all aspects of life and society if we are to be serious about climate action. But agreeing the need to change and actually changing are two very different beasts. So let's consider the popularity of chickens and project into the future. You see, humans love eating chicken. Even the millions that don't eat beef eat chicken, as do the millions that don't eat pork, choose not to eat pork. Even the millions that choose not to eat any meat often eat eggs. Hence, the global population of chickens is quite staggering. The current human population is 7.8, they're about 7.8 billion, whereas the chicken population is estimated at 19.4 billion. In Ireland alone, there are 70 million chickens, 70 million chickens produced each year for meat. And there are 2 million egg-laying hens. Isn't that hard to imagine? But by 2050, with a predicted human population of approaching possibly 9 billion people, unless our habits, our systems change, we will have a chicken population of in the region of 35 billion chickens. How will we deal with all the repercussions of such a number of animals? When you consider already a tricky problem is the waste of the animals, what to do and how to manage and how to prevent the runoff of the waste, the slurry of animals. This is a current issue here in Ireland with the growing pig population in Northern Ireland. Northern Ireland's pig industry has greatly increased its production levels and is approaching apparently a level of slurry or waste equivalent to a human population of 12 million. Just in Northern Ireland from pigs alone. So in Northern Ireland there's a human population of just over 1 million people, but there is the equivalent of 12 million people's waste being dealt with because of the pig population. And at present a large amount of that slurry is being exported into the Republic and used in various ways as fertilizer and in a digestion system for a gas. So there are solutions, but there's also a huge management challenge already, and if demand for meat only goes up, the problems are only exacerbated. So we face many challenges, even if we just keep it simple and consider chickens. Okay, let's sit down and look at the big picture. and the big questions, and what are our choices and our actions that we can do if we agree that we are looking at massive radical change being required for the way that we produce food. What do we mean by a systemic change? Here's a very simple way of looking at our mindset at the moment. Now, it could be economy as written here. It could be our societal outlook. Largely, we are based on a linear process at the moment, where we take, we make, we use, and waste is produced as the result. We have in more recent times moved towards what you could call a recycling society or economy. Take, make, use, recycle sometimes, use again, and waste. But as we've learned in recent years, that even though some things do get recycled, they often don't actually get recycled and end up in landfill. And this really isn't sustainable in any form. We are challenged to move to a more natural, zero waste process of a circular nature, as you can see here. Circular, taking, make, return, use, return, recycle, repair, reuse. And this is the challenge, to move our mindsets from this line resulting in waste to a circular system where things are designed to be able to be reused and taken apart and reused again and again, minimizing waste. For food, at the moment, the global food system is incredibly wasteful. Perhaps as much as 50% of the world's harvest food is wasted. In Ireland, a third of the food purchased by us goes to landfill. And this doesn't include the produce wasted on the farm or by supermarkets, which is really large. Food that's not accepted by supermarkets or doesn't leave the shelves and is then thrown out largely to landfill. But there's also other processes here that we need to take part of. And that is that before the take, there are other habits that need to change. We need to look at reduce our demands, our consumption, and refuse. So before we take even, we need to look at reducing the amounts we demand. So say not just replacing petrol cars with electric cars, but looking at public transport options, and refusing single-use plastics, legislating against them. Yeah. So moving on to the challenges, the multiple challenges facing the food system at present. And these are just a few listed here. A large part of the work of international development NGOs like Self-Help Africa is food security, because food can be available, but not necessarily distributed in the right place. It can be accessible, but maybe not affordable. This is all part of food security. Malnutrition is a really big problem. Perhaps 1 billion people are still malnourished. 800 million go hungry regularly. And obesity, even in what we might call developed economies and nations, is a growing problem. Obviously, the pressure on the environment, fishing, unsustainable practice of monocropping and all the artificial carbon-based fertilizers and insecticides that are required with this system. Then there's the question of GMO. genetically modified crops, and there are pros and cons to this. Similarly, with the organic movement, organic produce doesn't solve all the issues. And then another important side of this is solidarity with the workers, be they Irish agricultural workers and farming families, but also in this global system, the farmers around the world and their families. And then a global issue is that there's just not enough people engaged in agriculture. There's less and less, in fact. There are fewer and fewer farms, fewer and fewer farming families, particularly in Europe and the developed world. And the age demographic is of an aging sector. The farming age is getting older and older. The young people across the world don't want to farm. But as the little cartoon says, change isn't to be feared. And a difference in an opinion and a difference of approach is actually what's required. There is no one solution to food production or agriculture around the world. We actually need diversity in our food production, moving away from monoculture and an over-reliance of just a few crops. In fact, in the past, thousands of different plants were used for food. Now, currently, it's well under 200. And in fact, 9 crops account for almost 70% of our food production. So we're relying on a tiny amount of the diversity that is available to us. And the environment, as we've already commented on, is taking a massive hit on from our demands. So that, as you can see there, incredibly, 70% of the water that we use annually goes on agriculture. So huge changes and savings can be made there. 60% of the threats and loss to biodiversity is due to our demands on the land of agriculture, so loss of habitat. And agriculture around the world is a really huge player when it comes to emissions of greenhouse gases. So all these lead to contributing to climate change and threatening the very thing that the system is supposed to provide, and that's food for us. I want to share a short video here on one view of an alternative approach. Now, it isn't an approach, it's more of a mindset, like the movement from a linear way of design and thinking to a circular economy, a circular way of thinking.
Regenerative agriculture is a set of farming practices that increase biodiversity in soil organic matter. Currently, most agricultural practices are devastating to biodiversity. Even organic agriculture, while not as bad, still does more harm than good. Regenerative agriculture is a way to reverse this trend to actually make a positive impact on the land. So what does regenerative agriculture actually involve? Answering this question is actually pretty tricky, because the practices that work best largely depend on the land that's being worked with. So the variety of different practices border on infinity, a bit more than this video can cover. However, let's look at 3 common forms that regenerative agriculture can take. The soil is full of organisms which are helpful for plants. Some convert soil nitrogen into a plant-usable form. Some bring water to the plants that would otherwise be out of reach. Others loosen and aerate the soil, increasing water absorption and allowing plant roots to penetrate deeper. When soil is turned over by a machine, most of these organisms are killed, so the crops must rely on chemical fertilizer, which ends up leaching into the water. Central to no-till farming is to not do that. Instead of tilling, plant cover crops whose roots break up the soil. Let the worms aerate the soil and bring down nutrients. Keep the soil covered with an organic mulch, which will break down over time, adding more organic matter to the soil. From the release of methane to clearing forests for pasture land, cattle raising is known for being very environmentally destructive. But this is not inherent to grazing animals. If the right practices are put in place, enormous amounts of carbon can be sequestered into the ground, soil can be built, and even desertification can be reversed in a matter of years. Here's how it works. The growth of grass tends to start slow, accelerate, and slow down again. This middle area is where it accrues the most biomass the most efficiently. If it's eaten before it gets to this point, its growth will never speed up. This is what happens with traditional pastured animals. They eat all the grass, which doesn't have the chance to grow back fast enough before getting eaten again, and we have overgrazing. This leads to soil erosion, drought, and desertification. But if the animals are kept in a tightly packed herd, like they used to be in nature, the grass has time to grow before being eaten. All that biomass in the grass is carbon that comes from the air. Not all of the grass gets eaten, however. Some of it gets pooped on and trampled, which ends up creating the perfect conditions for new topsoil to be built. This ends up happening incredibly quickly. This is one of the most complex and location-dependent practices there are. I will therefore be overgeneralizing a bit. It always starts with observing a local forest and the relationships between everything in it. The plants, the animals, the fungi, the landscape, the soil, the water, and then recreating these relationships in a way that's just as ecologically resilient, but produces more food. Food forests are often thought of as comprising 7 layers: the root layer, the ground cover layer, the herb layer, the shrub layer, the low tree layer, the high tree layer, and the vine layer. Every one of these layers either produces some sort of food or medicine, or is in some way helpful to the system as a whole. The plants are mostly perennials and include as many native species as possible. These 3 examples of regenerative agriculture, plus all the rest of them, all have something in common. Whereas in conventional agriculture, you seek to create as many of one thing as possible, in regenerative agriculture, you seek to create as many relationships between things as possible. You are one of those things. What sort of relationship with the land do you want to foster?
Yeah, so what relationship with the land do we want to foster? Almost as wonderful as to contemplate what Ireland would look like covered in food forests. And what a transformation that is when you consider that at present, less than 2% of the farmed land in Ireland grows vegetables. And apparently 1% of Ireland's farms have orchards on them. So moving on, are Irish farmers willing to change? They get a very bad rap, and maybe farmers around the world the same, and are seen as resistant to new ideas. But as this video shows from the Irish organization Farming for Nature, and they have ambassadors of farmers who are showcasing the different and alternative ways that they are working their land.
When we were growing up, we were told produce more and more and more. Don't worry about price, just keep producing, increase production. But the younger generation, they're changing around, they're coming around to a different way of farming, this regenerative farming, where you're actually looking after the soil, looking after everything in nature, and it will respond to you and give you everything that you need.
The biggest thing I take from nature is diversity. Nature is so diverse. There's no monocultures in nature. So on the farm here we have many different enterprises. From a diversity point of view, that benefits nature immensely. As an economical point of view, it benefits my business because I have multiple streams of income.
The future for this farm is where it's going. Like there's something new every year that we're trying. You just have to be thinking on your feet a lot of the time, and no one can own it. That's the beauty of it.
What we need to do is continue the work so that other farmers can learn from it. It will be useful as we progress the whole notion of biodiversity protection and increase.
I think the first thing we need to do is observe what's going on. Just observe nature, and thereby learn a lot about nature simply by observing.
It's a completely different way of thinking. You're working with the farm is working with you, but you're not trying to change the farm into something that it's not. I think once you step back from that kind of thinking and appreciate it for what it actually is and what it's contributing and what you're part of, I think that's the bigger picture here.
I'm not the standard model for Farming for Nature awards in that I'm a commercial farmer. I'm trying to make as much money as possible. I'm fairly intensive, but I'm just doing a little bit differently. But if everybody did a little bit, if all farmers, no matter what their enterprise, just did a little bit on a landscape scale, that would make a huge difference.
So with the idea of looking at things anew, here's a fresh way to look at the Sustainable Development Goals, the UN Global Goals that Ireland is signed up to. In fact, Ireland chaired the original summit that decided on these goals back in 2015-16, along with Kenya. And we're used to seeing the goals as we have in the top left here in the chart. But this would be then placed in a regenerative model, a circular model, a nesting model is another term used for this. You can see here that they place the different goals into their common areas. So you've got the biosphere here at the bottom, and it's given the greatest importance. So we need to protect and regenerate, improve the biosphere. I remember talking about the slither of land that we survive on regarding the soil that we farm. So the biosphere needs to be our top priority, because in particular ourselves and food, it will not be possible if the biosphere is not protected and healthy. Then sitting within that are the society's needs, just and equitable society for all, education, health, and sustainable ways of living, sustainable cities. And only then can we consider the economy and our way of trade and our innovation around producing the goods that we wish to have. And then holding it all together through the middle is goal 17, the vital one, that is partnership, that this happens together as one. I think you can either lock everything together with goal 17, or you could possibly view it as another ring around the outside in that dark blue, holding everything. Because if we don't do it in partnership, small countries as well as large countries, small economies as well as the big economies, for this to be realized. So to finish with, you would think we would talk more about our health when it comes to food, but there's also the environment, the climate, and human rights and workers' rights elements to it all. But really, your health is your wealth, isn't it? So a better diet, better health. And this statistic, just to finish, that if we alter our diets, our demand on what we want our food system to produce, we will save lives and increase life living quality, increase our wealth, because we improve our health to a very dramatic level. So I hope that presentation, the videos and the little segments were of interest, and that you're enjoying these sessions, and that we are generating questions for you that you would like to share. There will be different ways that you can do that, either through emails to us or at the interactive elements of this course. Thank you very much. And you might be feeling a bit hungry now, so go off and enjoy some bounty of the world we live in. Thank you.